The mahogany doors of the Sterling Croft Auction House swung open with a heavy, resonant thud, admitting me into a world of old money, whispered secrets, and ruthless ambition. The grand hall was cathedral of wealth, illuminated by crystal chandeliers that cast a warm, golden glow over the velvet upholstered chairs. The air smelled of expensive perfume, aged leather, and the intoxicating metallic scent of high-stakes greed. I stood near the back, my hands tucked into the pockets of my slightly worn tweed jacket, feeling entirely out of place among the sea of bespoke suits and diamond-encrusted jewelry. I wasn't here to socialize. I was here for my grandfather. Arthur Hawthorne had been a titan of industry, a self-made billionaire who had built a global logistics empire from a single rusted truck. But in his final years, the empire meant nothing to him. His children, my aunts and uncles, had abandoned him, too busy chasing their own fortunes and social climbing. I was the only one who stayed. I had moved into his sprawling, historic estate, the Hawthorne Manor, and spent the last 5 years of his life caring for him, reading to him, and listening to his stories. When he passed away 6 months ago, the family had descended like vultures, expected to carve up his $200 million fortune. But Arthur had outsmarted them. He had placed his entire estate, including the manor and its contents, into a blind trust, to be auctioned off by Sterling Croft, with the proceeds going to his designated beneficiaries. The family was furious, but they couldn't contest it. They were all here today, sitting in the front rows, eagerly waiting to buy back their inheritance. And then there was Lucas. Lucas Reed was my nephew, the son of my eldest sister. He was 28, slick, arrogant, and possessed a cruel streak that he masked with a charming smile. He was also the star auctioneer at Sterling Croft. He had used his family connections to secure the position, and he treated the job not as a profession, but as a stage for his own ego. He knew I was here. He had made sure of it. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucas's voice boomed through the hall, smooth and dripping with condescension. He stood on the raised podium, holding his gavel like a scepter. Welcome to the sale of the Hawthorne estate, a truly magnificent collection of fine art, rare timepieces, and historic real estate. The starting bid for the manor and its contents is $2 million. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd before locking onto me. A cruel smirk played on his lips. I see we have a surprise bid in the back, Lucas said, his voice echoing in the suddenly quiet room. Mr. Thomas Reed. I assume you're here to admire the view, Uncle Thomas, unless you found a few pennies under your sofa cushions. We all know your accounts are frozen, and your little caretaker salary barely covers your rent. A few of my relatives in the front row chuckled. My sister, Lucas's mother, rolled her eyes dramatically. I didn't flinch. I just raised my wooden paddle. $2.5 million, I said, my voice calm and steady. Lucas laughed, a loud, grating sound that bounced off the high ceilings. I'm sorry, Thomas, but the minimum increment is $500,000. And more importantly, we require proof of funds for bids over $2 million. We all know you don't have the money. Please don't disrupt the proceedings. Security, please keep an eye on Mr. Reed. I have the funds, I said, my voice carrying perfectly in the silent room. I'm bidding $2.5 million. You're bidding on a dream, Thomas, Lucas sneered, leaning over the podium. You're a washed-up failure who gave up a promising career to play nursemaid to a dying old man. You have nothing. You are nothing. Now sit down and shut up before I have you thrown out. He reached down, snatched my bitter registration card from the table in front of me, and deliberately tore it in half, letting the pieces flutter to the floor. The crowd gasped. It was a blatant, humiliating breach of auction protocol, but Lucas was untouchable. He was a star, and I was the family charity case. Next lot, Lucas said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. A rare 1955 Patek Philippe. I stood there, my heart pounded with a cold, crystalline rage. He had mocked my grief. He had mocked my loyalty. He had torn up my right to bid. But he had made one fatal mistake. He didn't know what I knew. The heavy oak doors at the back of the hall suddenly swung open with a loud bang. The entire room turned. Walking down the center aisle was Victoria Sterling, the senior managing partner of Sterling Croft and the court-appointed executor of my grandfather's estate. She was a woman of iron will, dressed in a sharp black suit, her face set in a mask of absolute fury. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be at the probate court. She marched straight up to the podium, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Lucas's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of confused panic. "Miss Sterling," he stammered, "we're in the middle of the auction. I can pause for a moment, but—" "Stop the auction, Lucas," Victoria said, her voice like cracking ice. "Right now." Lucas blinked, taken aback. "But the clients, the bids—" "I said stop." Victoria snapped, slamming her hand on the podium. She turned to face the crowd, pulling a thick, leather-bound document from her briefcase. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but the probate court has just finalized the reading of Arthur Hawthorne's true last will and testament. The previous will, which placed the estate in a blind trust for auction, was a decoy, a legal feint designed to test the loyalty of his family." The room erupted in shocked whispers. My relatives in the front row stood up, their faces pale. "Arthur Hawthorne," Victoria continued, her voice ringing with authority, "has left 100% of his estate, including the Hawthorne Manor, the art collection, and his entire financial portfolio, to his sole caretaker and grandson, Thomas Reed." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Lucas's face went completely ashen. He looked at me, his eyes wide with sudden, terrifying realization. "But that is not all," Victoria said, turning her ici gaze directly to Lucas. "It has also been revealed that Arthur Hawthorne was not merely a client of Sterling Croft. Through a series of blind holding company, Arthur Hawthorne was the silent majority shareholder of this very auction house. Which means, as of this morning, Thomas Reed is the majority owner of Sterling Croft." Lucas' knees actually buckled. He gripped the edge of the podium to keep from falling over. His face drained of every ounce of color, turning the shade of all parchment. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You own the auction house." Lucas whispered, his voice trembling so violently it was barely audible. "I do," he said, my voice kept carrying perfectly in the dead silence. He walked slowly down the aisle, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. He stopped at the foot of the podium and looked up at my nephew. "You tore up my registration card, Lucas," he said softly, "but you forgo one thing. You work for me." Victoria stepped forward, handing Lucas a crisp white envelope. "Lucas Reed, you are hereby terminated for gross unprofessional conduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and insulting the majority owner of this firm. Security will escort you off the premise. Furthermore, Monsieur Reed's legal team will be in touch regarding a lawsuit for the emotional distress you caused Arthur Hawthorne in his final days." Lucas stared at the envelope, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold it. The arrogance, the cruelty, the smug superiority, all of it shattered in an instant, replaced by the hollow, broken gaze of a man who had just lost everything. He looked at his mother, but she was too busy staring at me in horror to notice his plight. "Get out of my sight," he said, my voice dropping to a chilling, authoritative register. Lucas didn't say a word. He climbed down from the podium, he said en jingle, and walked out the back doors, followed closely by two burly security guards. He stepped up onto the podium. He looked out at the sea of shocked face, at the relative who had abandoned my grandfather, at the elite bidder who had come to pick his bones. "The auction is cancelled," he announced, my voice steady and strong. "The Hawthorne estate is not for sale. It is returning to the family that actually cared for it. And for the rest of you, thank you for coming. Good day." He walked out of the auction house, the heavy mahogany doors closing behind me with a final, satisfying thud. Sometimes, people think power is about being the loudest voice in the room. They think it's about humiliating others to elevate yourself. But true power isn't about cruelty. It's about patience, loyalty, and knowing exactly who holds the cards. Lucas thought he wasn't too sharp because he held the gavel. He forgot that in this world, the auctioneer works for the house, but the owner holds the gavel. And he owns the house. He looked at me. He tore up my paddle. And in the end, he lost his job, his reputation, and his future. That was justice enough for me.